Chapter 16. Reaching the mainland some moments later, and squelching back to the house, accompanied by Bobby, like a couple of Napoleons squelching back from Moscow, we encountered Aunt Dahlia, who, wearing that hat of hers that looks like one of those baskets you carry fish in, was messing about in the herbaceous border by the tennis lawn. She gaped at us dumbly for perhaps 5 seconds, then uttered an ejaculation far from suitable to mixed company, which she had no doubt picked up from a fellow Nimrod in her hunting days. Having got this off the chest, she said, "What's been going on in this joint? Wilbur Cream came here just now, soaked to the eyebrows, and now you two appear leaking at every seam. Have you all been playing water polo with your clothes on?" "Not so much water polo, more that seaside bathing bell stuff," I said. "But it's a long story, and one feels that the cagey thing for Kipper and me to do now is to nip along and get into some dry things. Not to linger conferring with you much," I added courteously, "as we always enjoy your conversation. The extraordinary thing is that I saw Upjohn not long ago, and he was as dry as a bone. Now, how was that? Couldn't you get him to play with you?" "He had to go and talk to his lawyer on the phone," I said, and leaving Bobby to place the facts before her, we resumed our squelching. And I was in my room, having shed the moistened outer crust and substituted something a bit more sec in pale flannel, when there was a knock on the door. I flung wide the gates and found Bobby and Kipper on the threshold. The first thing I noticed about their demeanour was the strange absence of gloom, despondency, and what-not. I mean, considering that it was little more than a quarter of an hour since all our hopes and dreams had taken the knock, one would have expected their hearts to be bowed down with weight of woe. But their whole aspect was one of buck and optimism. It occurred to me, as a possible solution, that with that bulldog spirit of never admitting defeat, which has made Englishmen, and, of course, Englishwomen, what they are, they had decided to have another go along the same lines at some future date, and I asked if this was the case. The answer was in the negative. Kipper said no, there was no likelihood of getting Upjohn down to the lake again, and Bobby said that even if they did, it wouldn't be any good, because I would be sure to mess things up once more. This stung me, I confess. "How do you mean, mess things up? Will you be bound to trip over your flat feet and fall in, as you did today?" "Pardon me," I said, preserving with an effort the polished suavity demanded from an English gentleman when chewing the rag with one of the other sex. "You're talking through the back of your fat little neck. I did not trip over my flat feet. I was hurled into the depths by an act of God, to wit, a totally unexpected dachshund getting between my legs. If you're going to blame anyone, blame the goof Phyllis for bringing Augustus there and calling him, in his hearing, a sweet pussykins. Naturally it made him sore and disinclined to stand any lip from barking dogs." "Yes," said Kipper, always the staunch pal. "It wasn't Bertie's fault, Angel. Say what you will of dachshunds, their peculiar shape makes them the easiest breed of dog to trip over in existence. I feel that Bertie emerges without a stain on his character." "Well, I don't," said Bobby. "Still, it doesn't matter." "No, it doesn't really matter," said Kipper, "because your aunt has suggested a scheme that's just as good as the Lanchester-Simmons thing, if not better. She was telling Bobby about the time when Boko Fittleworth was trying to ingratiate himself with your Uncle Percy, and you, very sportingly, offered to go and call your Uncle Percy a lot of offensive names, so that Boko, hovering outside the door, could come in and stick up for him, thus putting himself in solid with him. You probably remember the incident." I quivered. I remembered the incident, all right. "She thinks the same treatment would work with Upjohn, and I'm sure she's right. You know how you feel when you suddenly discover you've a real friend, a fellow who thinks you're terrific and won't hear a word against you. It touches you. If you had anything in your nature of a prejudice against the chap, you change your opinion of him. You feel you can't do anything to injure such a sterling bloke, and that is how Upjohn is going to feel about me, Bertie, when I come in and lend him my sympathy and support, as you stand there calling him all the names you can think of. You must have picked up dozens from your aunt. She used to hunt, and if you hunt, you have to know all the names there are, because people are always riding over hounds and all that. Ask her to jot down a few of the bests on a half-sheet of notepaper." "He won't need that," said Bobby. "He's probably got them all tucked away in his mind." "Of course. Learned them at her knee as a child. Well, that's the setup, Bertie. You wait your opportunity and corner Upjohn somewhere and tower over him, as he crouches in his chair, and shake your finger in his face and abuse him roundly. And when he's quailing beneath your scorn and wishing some friend in need would intervene and save him from this terrible ordeal, I come in, having heard all. Bobby suggests that I knock you down, but I don't think I could do that. The recollection of our ancient friendship would make me pull my punch. I shall simply rebuke you. Wooster, I shall say, I am shocked. Shocked and astounded. I cannot understand how you can talk like that to a man I have always respected and looked up to. A man in whose preparatory school I spent the happiest years of my life. You strangely forget yourself, Wooster. Upon which you slink out, bathed in shame and confusion, and Upjohn thanks me brokenly and says if there is anything he can do for me, I have only to name it. I still think you ought to knock him down. Having endeared myself to him thus, much more box office, having endeared myself to him thus, I lead the conversation round to the libel suit. One good punch in the eye would do it. I say that I have seen the current issue of the Thursday Review, and I can quite understand him wanting to mulct the journal in substantial damages. But don't forget, Mr. Upjohn, I say, that when a weekly paper loses a chunk of money, it has to retrench, and the way it retrenches is by getting rid of the more junior members of its staff. You wouldn't want me to lose my job, would you, Mr. Upjohn? He starts. Are you on the staff of the Thursday Review? He said. For the time being, yes, I say. But if you bring that suit, I shall be selling pencils in the street. This is the crucial moment. Looking into his eyes, I can see that he's thinking of that 5,000 quid, and for an instant, quite naturally, he hesitates. Then his better self prevails. His eyes soften. They fill with tears. He clasps my hand. He tells me he could use 5,000 quid as well as the next man, but no money in the world would make him dream of doing an injury to the fellow who championed him so stoutly against that louse Wooster, and the scene ends with our going off together to Swordfish's pantry for a drop of port, probably with our arms round each other's waists. And that night he writes a letter to his lawyer telling him to call the suit off. Any questions? Not from me, said Bobby. It isn't as if he could find out that it was you who wrote that review. It wasn't signed. Oh, no, thank heaven for the editorial austerity that prevented that. But I can't see a flaw in the scenario. He'll have to withdraw the suit. In common decency, one would think. The only thing that remains is to choose a time and place for Bertie to operate, and there is no time like the present. Now, how do we locate Upjohn? He's in Travers's study. I saw him through the French window. Excellent. Then, Bertie, if you're ready... It will probably have been noticed that during these exchanges I had taken no part in the conversation. This was because I was fully occupied with envisaging the horror that lay before me. I knew that it did lie before me, of course, for where the ordinary man would have met the suggestion they had made with a firm nolle prosequi, I was barred from doing this by the code of the Woosters, which, as is pretty generally known, renders it impossible for me to let a pal down. If the only way of saving a boyhood friend from having to sell pencils in the street, though I should have thought that blood oranges would have been the far more lucrative line, was by wagging my finger in the face of Aubrey Upjohn and calling him names, that finger would have to be wagged, and those names called. The ordeal would whiten my hair from the roots up and leave me a mere shell of my former self, but it was one that I must go through. Mine not to reason why, as the fellow said. So I uttered a rather husky "righto," and tried not to think of how the Upjohn face looked without its moustache. For what chilled the feet most was the mental picture of that bare upper lip which he had so often twitched at me in what are called days of yore. Dimly, as we started off for the arena, I could hear Bobby saying, "My hero," and Kipper asking anxiously if I was in good voice. But it would have taken a fat lot more than my heroing and solicitude about my vocal cords to restore tone to Bertram's nervous system. I was, in short, feeling like an inexperienced novice going up against the heavyweight champion, when in due course I drew up at the study door, opened it, and tottered in. I could not forget that an Aubrey Upjohn, who for years had been looking strong parents in the eye and making them wilt, and whose toughness was a byword in Bramley-on-Sea, was not a man likely to wag a finger in the face of. Uncle Tom's study was a place I seldom entered during my visits to Brinkley Court, because when I did go there he always grabbed me and started to talk about old silver, whereas if he caught me in the open he often touched on other topics. and the way I looked at it was that there was no sense in sticking one's neck out. It was more than a year since I'd been inside this sanctum, and I'd forgotten how extraordinarily like its interior was to that of Aubrey Upjohn's lair at Malvern House. Discovering this now, and seeing Aubrey Upjohn seated at the desk, as I had so often seen him sit on the occasions when he'd sent for me to discuss some recent departure of mine from the straight and narrow path, I found what little was left of my sang-froid expiring with a pop. And at the same time I spotted the flaw in the scheme I had undertaken to sit in on, viz. That you can't just charge into a room and start calling someone names, out of a blue sky as it were. You have to lead up to the thing. Poor parlours, in short, are of the essence. So I said, "Oh, hello," which seemed to me about as good a poor parlour as you could have by way of an opener. I should imagine that those statesmen of whom I was speaking always edge into their conferences conducted in an atmosphere of the utmost cordiality in some such manner. Reading, I said. He lowered his book, one of Ma Cream's, I noticed, and flashed an upper lip at me. "Your powers of observation have not led you astray, Worcester. I am reading." "Oh, interesting book?" "Very. I'm counting the minutes until I can resume its perusal undisturbed." Now, I'm pretty quick, and I at once spotted that the atmosphere was not of the utmost cordiality. He hadn't spoken mateyly, and he wasn't eyeing me mateyly. His whole manner seemed to suggest that he felt that I was taking up space in the room which could have been better employed for other purposes. However, I persevered. "I see you've shaved off your moustache." "I have." "You do not feel, I hope, that I pursued a mistaken course?" "Oh, no. No, rather not. No, I grew a moustache myself last year, but I had to get rid of it." "Indeed. Public sentiment was against it." "I see. Well, I shall be delighted to hear more of your reminiscences, Worcester, but at the moment I'm expecting a telephone call from my lawyer." "I thought you'd had one." "I beg your pardon." "When you were down by the lake, didn't you go off to talk to him?" "I did, but when I reached the telephone he had grown tired of waiting and had rung off. I should never have allowed Miss Wickham to take me away from the house. She wanted you to see the big fish, so I understood her to say. Talking of fish, you must have been surprised to find Kipper here." "Kipper? Herring." "Oh, herring," he said, and one spotted the almost total lack of animation in his voice. And conversation had started to flag when the door flew open, and the goof Phyllis bounded in, full of girlish excitement. "Oh, Daddy," she burbled, "are you busy?" "No, my dear. Can I speak to you about something?" "Certainly. Goodbye, Worcester." I saw what this meant. He didn't want me around. There was nothing for it but to ooze out through the French window, so I oozed, and had hardly got outside when Bobby sprang at me like a leopardess. "What on earth are you fooling about for like this, Bertie?" she stage-whispered. "All that rot about moustaches. I thought you'd be well into it by this time." I pointed out that as yet Aubrey Upjohn had not given me a cue. "Oh, you and your cues. All right, me and my cues. But I've got to sort of lead the conversation in the right direction, haven't I?" "I see what Bertie means, darling," said Kipper. "He wants a point d'appui." "A what?" said Bobby. "Sort of jumping-off place." The Beazle snorted. "If you ask me, he's lost his nerve. I knew this would happen. The worm has got cold feet." I could have crushed her by drawing her attention to the fact that worms don't have feet, cold or piping hot, but I'd no wish to bandy words. "I must ask you, Kipper," I said, with frigid dignity, "to request your girlfriend to preserve the decencies of debate. My feet are not cold. I'm as intrepid as a lion, and only too anxious to get down to brass tacks, but just as I was working round to the res, Phyllis came in. She said she'd something she wanted to speak to him about." Bobby snorted again, this time in a despairing sort of way. "She'll be there for hours. It's no good waiting." "No," said Kipper. "May as well call it off for the moment. We'll let you know time and place of the next fixture, Bertie." "Oh, thanks," I said, and they drifted away. And about a couple of minutes later, as I stood there brooding on Kipper's sad case, Aunt Dahlia came along. I was glad to see her. I thought she might possibly come across with aid and comfort, for though, like the female in the poem I was mentioning, she sometimes inclined to be a toughish egg in hours of ease, she could generally be relied on to be there with the soothing solace when one had anything wrong with one's brow. As she approached, I got the impression that her own brow had for some reason taken it on the chin. Quite a good deal of that upon which all the ends of the earth are come stuff, it seemed to me. Nor was I mistaken. "Bertie," she said, heaving to beside me and waving a trowel in an overwrought manner, "do you know what?" "No, what?" "I'll tell you what," said the aged relative, rapping out a sharp monosyllable, such as she might have uttered in her Quorn or Pytchley days, on observing a unit of the pack of hounds chasing a rabbit. "That ass Phyllis has gone and got engaged to Wilbert Cream." Chapter 17. Her words gave me quite a wallop. I don't say I reeled and everything didn't actually go black, but I was shaken, as what nephew wouldn't have been? When a loved aunt has sweated herself to the bone trying to save her godchild from the clutches of a New York playboy, and learns that all her well-meant efforts have gone blue on her, it's only natural for her late brother's son to shudder in sympathy. "You don't mean that," I said. "Who told you?" "She did." In person?" "In the flesh. She came skipping to me just now, clapping her little hands and bleating about how very, very happy she was, dear Mrs. Travers. A silly young geezer, I nearly conked her one with my trowel. I'd always thought her half-baked, but now I think they didn't even put her in the oven. But how did it happen? Apparently that dog of hers joined you in the water." "Ah, yes, that's right, yes, he took his dip with the rest of us. But what's that got to do with it?" "Wilbert Cream dived in and saved him." Well, he could have got ashore perfectly well under his own steam. In fact, he was already on his way, doing what looked like an Australian crawl. That wouldn't occur to a pinhead like Phyllis. To her, Wilbert Cream is the man who rescued her Daxon from a watery grave. So, she's going to marry him. "But you don't marry fellows because they rescue Daxons. You do if you've a mentality like hers." It seems odd, and is. But that's how it goes. Girls like Phyllis Mills are an open book to me. For 4 years I was, if you remember, the proprietor and editress of a weekly paper for women. She was alluding to the periodical entitled Milady's Boudoir, to the husbands and brothers page of which I once contributed an article or piece on what the well-dressed man is wearing. It had recently been sold to a mug up Liverpool way, and I have never seen Uncle Tom look chirpier than when the deal went through, he for those 4 years having had to foot the bills. "I don't suppose," she continued, "that you were a regular reader, so for your information there appeared in each issue a short story, and in 70% of those short stories the hero won the heroine's heart by saving her dog or a cat or a canary or whatever foul animal she happened to possess. Well, Phyllis didn't write all those stories, but she easily might have done, for that's the way her mind works. When I say her mind," said the blood relation, "I refer to the 1/4 teaspoonful of brain which you might possibly find in her head if you sank an artesian well. Oh, poor Jane." Poor who?" "Her mother, Jane Mills." "Oh, yes, she was a pal of yours, you told me." "Best I ever had. And she was always saying to me, 'Dahlia, old girl, if I pop off before you, for heaven's sake look after Phyllis and see that she doesn't marry some ghastly outsider. She's sure to want to. Girls always do. Goodness knows why,' she said. And I knew she was thinking of her first husband, who was a heel to end all heels, and a constant pain in the neck to her, till one night he most fortunately walked into the River Thames while under the influence of the sauce, and didn't come up for days. 'Do stop her,' she said, and I said, 'Jane, you can rely on me.' And now this happens." I endeavoured to soothe. "You can't blame yourself." "Yes, I can. It is not your fault. I invited Wilbert Cream here merely from a wifely desire to do Uncle Tom a bit of good, and I let Upjohn stick around, always at her elbow, egging her on. Yes, now, Upjohn's the bird I blame. Me too. But for his undue influence, did they call it? Phyllis would have remained a bachelor, or spinster, or whatever it is. Now art the man, Upjohn, seems to me the way to sum it up. He ought to be ashamed of himself. And am I going to tell him so? I'd give a tenner to have Aubrey Upjohn here at this moment. You can get him for nothing. He's in Uncle Tom's study. Her face lit up. He is? She threw her head back and inflated the lungs. Upjohn, she boomed, rather like someone calling the cattle home across the sands of Dee, and I issued a kindly word of warning. Watch the blood pressure, old ancestor. Never you mind about my blood pressure. You let it alone, and I'll leave you alone. Upjohn! He appeared in the French window, looking cold and severe, as I had so often seen him look when hobnobbing with him in his study at Malden House. Self not there as a willing guest, but because I'd been sent for. I should like to see Worcester in my study immediately after morning prayers, was the formula. Who is making that abominable noise? Oh, it's you, Dahlia. Yes, it's me. You wish to see me? Yes, but not the way you're looking now. I'd have preferred you to have fractured your spine, or at least to have broken a couple of ankles and got a touch of leprosy. My dear Dahlia. I am not your dear Dahlia. I'm a seething volcano. Have you seen Phyllis? She has just left me. Did she tell you? That she was engaged to Wilbert Cream? Certainly. And I suppose you're delighted? Well, of course I am. Yes, of course you are. I can well imagine that it's your dearest wish to see that unfortunate mutton-headed girl become the wife of a man who lets off stink bombs in nightclubs and pinches the spoons and has had 3 divorces already, and who, if the authorities play their cards right, will end up cracking rocks in Sing Sing. That's unless the loony bin gets his bid in first. Just a Prince Charming, you might say. I don't understand you. Then you are an ass. Well, really, said Aubrey Upjohn, and there was a dangerous note in his voice. I could see that the relative's manner, which was not affectionate, and her words, which lacked cordiality, were peeving him. It looked like an odds-on shot that in about another 2 ticks he would be giving her the colic for the day to write out 10 times, or even instructing her to bend over while he fetched his wang-ee. You can push these preparatory schoolmasters just so far. A fine way for Jane's daughter to end up Mrs. Broadway Willie. Broadway Willie? That's what he's called in the circles in which he moves, in which he will now introduce Phyllis. Meet the Mall, he'll say, and then he'll teach her in 12 easy lessons how to make stink bombs, and the children, if and when, will be trained to pick people's pockets as they dandle them on their knee. And you will be responsible, Aubrey Upjohn. I didn't like the way things were trending. Admittedly, the aged relative was putting up a great show, and it was a pleasure to listen to her. But I'd seen Upjohn's lip twitch, and that look of smug satisfaction came into his face, which I'd so often seen when he'd been counsel for prosecution in some case in which I was involved and had spotted a damaging flaw in my testimony. The occasion when I was on trial for having broken the drawing-room window with the cricket ball springs to mind. It was plain to an eye as discerning as mine that he was about to put it across the old flesh and blood properly, making her wish she hadn't spoken. I couldn't see how, but the symptoms were all there. I was right. The twitching lip had not misled me. If I might be allowed to make a remark, my dear Dahlia, he said, I think we're talking across purposes. You appear to be under the impression that Phyllis is marrying Wilbert's younger brother, Wilfred, the notorious playboy whose escapades have caused the family so much distress, and who, as you are correct in saying, is known to his disreputable friends as Broadway Willie. Wilfred, I agree, would make, and on 3 successive occasions has made, a most undesirable husband. But no one, to my knowledge, has spoken a derogatory word of Wilbert. I know few young men who are more generally respected. He is a member of the faculty of one of the greatest American universities over in this country on his sabbatical. He teaches Romance languages. Stop me if I've told you this before. I rather fancy I have. But once, when I was up at Oxford and chatting on the river bank with a girl called, something that slipped my mind, there was a sound of barking, and a great hefty dog of the hound of the Baskervilles type came galloping at me, obviously intent on mayhem. Its whole aspect that of a dog that has no use for woosters. And I was just commending my soul to God, and thinking that this was where my new flannel trousers got about 30 bobs worth of value bitten out of them, when the girl, waiting till she saw the whites of his eyes, with extraordinary presence of mind, opened a coloured Japanese umbrella in the animal's face, upon which, with a startled exclamation, it did 3 back somersaults and retired into private life. And the reason I bring this up now is that, barring the somersaults, Aunt Dahlia's reaction to this communique was precisely that of the above hound to the Japanese umbrella. The same visible taken-abackness. She has since told me that her emotions were identical with those she had experienced when she was out with the Pytchley, and riding over a ploughed field in rainy weather, and the horse of a sports lover in front of her suddenly kicked 3 pounds of wet mud into her face. She gulped like a bulldog trying to swallow a sirloin steak many sizes too large for its thoracic cavity. "You mean there are 2 of them?" "Exactly." "And Wilbert isn't the one I thought he was?" "You have grasped the position of affairs to a nicety. You will appreciate now, my dear Dahlia," said Upjohn, speaking with the same unction, if that is the word, with which he had spoken when unmasking his batteries and presenting unshakable proof that yours was the hand Worcester which propelled this cricket ball. "You will appreciate now that your concern, though doing you the greatest credit, has been needless. I could wish Phyllis no better husband. Wilbert has looks, brains, character, and excellent prospects," he added, rolling the words round his tongue like vintage port. "His father, I should imagine, would be worth at least $20 million. And Wilbert is the elder son. Yes, most satisfactory. Most—" As he spoke, the telephone rang, and with a quick "ah," he shot back into the study like a homing rabbit. Chapter 18. For perhaps a quarter of a minute after he'd passed from the scene, the aged relative stood struggling for utterance. At the end of this period, she found speech. "Of all the damn silly, fat-headed things," she vociferated, if that's the word. "With a million ruddy names to choose from, these ruddy creams call one ruddy son Wilbert and the other ruddy son Wilfred, and both these ruddy sons are known as Willie. Just going out of their way to mislead the innocent bystander. You'd think people would have more consideration." Again I begged her to keep her eye on her blood pressure and not get so worked up, and once more she brushed me off, this time with a curt request that I would go and boil my head. "You'll be worked up if you've just been scored off by Aubrey Upjohn, with that loathsome, self-satisfied look on his face, as if he'd been rebuking a pimply pupil at his beastly school for shuffling his feet in church." "Odd that," I said, struck by the coincidence. "He once rebuked me for that very reason. And I had pimples." "Pompous ass. Shows what a small world it is. What's he doing here, anyway? I didn't invite him." "Bung him out. I took this point up with you before, if you remember, and cast him into the outer darkness, where there is a wailing and a gnashing of teeth." "I will, if he gives me any more of his lip. I can see you're in a dangerous mood. You bet I'm dangerous. My God, he's with us again." And A. Upjohn was indeed filtering through the French window. But he'd lost the look of which the ancestor had complained. The one he was wearing now seemed to suggest that, since last heard from, something had occurred to wake the fiend that slept in him. "Dahlia," yes, better make it vociferated once more. I'm pretty sure it's the word I want. The fiend that slept in Aunt Dahlia was also up on its toes. She gave him a look which, if directed at an erring member of the personnel of the Corn or Pytchley Hound Ensemble, would have had that member sticking his tail between his legs and resolving for the future to lead a better life. "Now what?" Just as Aunt Dahlia had done, Aubrey Upjohn struggled for utterance. Quite a bit of utterance struggling there had been around these parts this summer afternoon. "I have just been speaking to my lawyer on the telephone," he said, getting going after a short stage wait. "I had asked him to make inquiries and ascertain the name of the author of that libellous attack on me in the columns of the Thursday Review. He did so, and has now informed me that it was the work of my former pupil, Reginald Herring." He paused at this point to let us chew it over, and the heart sank. Mine, I mean. Aunt Dahlia seemed to be carrying on much as usual. She scratched her chin with her trowel and said, "Oh, yes?" Upjohn blinked, as if he'd been expecting something better than this in the way of sympathy and concern. "Is that all you can say?" "That's the lot." "Oh, Well, I am suing the paper for heavy damages, and furthermore, I refuse to remain in the same house with Reginald Herring. Either he goes, or I go. There was the sort of silence which I believe cyclones drop into for a second or two before getting down to it and starting to give the populace the works. Throbbing? Yes, throbbing wouldn't be a bad word to describe it. Nor would electric, for the matter of that. And if you care to call it ominous, it'll be all right by me. It was a silence of the type that makes the toes curl and sends a shiver down the spinal cord as you stand waiting for the bang. I could see Aunt Dahlia swelling slowly like a chunk of bubble gum, and a less prudent man than Bertram Wooster would have warned her again about her blood pressure. "I beg your pardon," she said. He repeated the key words. "Oh," said the relative, and went off with a pop. I could have told Upjohn he was asking for it. Normally, as genial a soul as ever broke biscuit, this aunt, when stirred, can become the haughtiest of grand dames, before whose wrath the stoutest quail, and she doesn't, like some, have to use a lorgnette to reduce the citizenry to pulp. She does it all with the naked eye. "Oh," she said, "so you have decided to revise my guest list for me. You have the nerve. You have the—" I saw she needed helping out. "Audacity," I said, throwing her the line. "The audacity to dictate to me who I shall have in my house." It should have been whom, but I let it go. "You have the—" crust. "The immortal rind," she amended, and I had to admit it was stronger, "to tell me whom," she got it right this time, "I may entertain at Brinkley Court, and who," wrong again, "I may not. Very well. If you feel unable to breathe the same air as my friends, you must please yourself. I believe the Bull and Bush in Market Snodsbury is quite comfortable. Well spoken of in the Automobile Guide," I said. "I shall go there," said Upton. "I shall go there as soon as my things are packed. Perhaps you will be good enough to tell your butler to pack them." He strode off, and she went into Uncle Tom's study, me following, she still snorting. She rang the bell. Jeeves appeared. "Jeeves," said the relative, surprised. "I was ringing for—" "It is Sir Roderick's afternoon off, madam." "Oh, well, would you mind packing Mr. Upjohn's things, Jeeves? He is leaving us." "Very good, madam." "And you can drive him to Market Snodsbury, Bertie." "Oh, righto," I said, not much liking the assignment, but liking less the idea of endeavouring to thwart this incandescent aunt in her current frame of mind. And safety first is the Wooster slogan. Chapter 19. It isn't much of a run from Brinkley Court to Market Snodsbury, and I deposited Upjohn at the Bull and Bush and started MPHing it homewards in what you might call a trice. We parted, of course, on rather distant terms, but the great thing when you've got an Upjohn on your books is to part and not be fussy about how it's done. And had it not been for all this worry about Kipper, for whom I was now mourning in spirit more than ever, I should have been feeling fine. I could see no happy issue for him from the soup in which he was immersed. No words had been exchanged between Upjohn and self on the journey out, but the glimpses I had caught of his face from the corner of the eye had told me that he was grim and resolute. His supply of the milk of human kindness plainly short by several gallons. No hope, it seemed to me, of turning him from his fell purpose. I garaged the car and went to Aunt Dahlia's sanctum to ascertain whether she'd cooled off at all since I'd left her, but I was still anxious about that blood pressure of hers. One doesn't want aunts going up in a sheet of flame all over the place. She wasn't there, having, I learned later, withdrawn to her room to bathe her temples with eau de cologne and do yogi deep breathing. But Bobby was, and not only Bobby, but Jeeves. He was handing her something in an envelope, and she was saying, "Oh, Jeeves, you've saved a human life." And he was saying, "Not at all, miss." The gist, of course, escaped me, but I had no leisure to probe into gists. "Where's Kipper?" I asked, and was surprised to note that Bobby was dancing round the room on the tips of her toes, uttering animal cries, apparently ecstatic in their nature. "Reggie," she said, suspending the farmyard imitations for a moment. He went for a walk." "Does he know that Upjohn's found out who wrote that thing?" "Yes, your aunt told him." "Then we ought to be in conference." "About Upjohn's libel action?" Oh, it's all right about that. Jeeves has pinched his speech." I could make nothing of this. It seemed to me that the Beazle spoke in riddles. Have you an impediment in your speech, Jeeves? No, sir. Then what, if anything, does the young prune mean? Miss Wickham's allusion is to the typescript of the speech, which Mr. Upjohn is to deliver tomorrow to the scholars of Market Snodsbury Grammar School, sir. She said you'd pinched it. Precisely, sir. I started. You don't mean... Yes, he does, said Bobby, resuming the ballet russe movements. Your aunt told him to pack up John's bags, and the first thing he saw when he smacked into it was the speech. He trousered it and brought it along to me. I raised an eyebrow. Well, really, Jeeves, I deemed it best, sir. And did you deem right, said Bobby, executing an Oginski, whatever it's called. Either Upjohn agrees to drop that libel suit, or he doesn't get these notes, as he calls them, and without them he won't be able to utter a word. He'll have to come across with the price of the papers, won't he, Jeeves? He would appear to have no alternative, miss. Unless he wants to get up on that platform and stand there opening and shutting his mouth like a goldfish. We've got him cold. Yes, but half a second, I said. I spoke reluctantly. I didn't want to damp the young ball of worsted in her hours of joy, but a thought had occurred to me. I see the idea, of course. I remember Aunt Dahlia telling me about this strange inability of Upjohn's to be silver-tongued unless he has the material in his grasp. But suppose he says he's ill and can't appear? He won't. I would. But you aren't trying to get the Conservative Association of the Market Snodsbury Division to choose you as their candidate at the coming by-election. Upjohn is, and it's vitally important for him to address the multitude tomorrow and make a good impression. Because half the selection committee have sons at the school, and will be there, waiting to judge for themselves how good he is as a speaker. Their last nominee stuttered, and they didn't discover it until the time came for him to dish it out to the constituents. They don't want to make a mistake this time. Yes, I get you now, I said. I remember that Aunt Dahlia had spoken to me of Upjohn's political ambition. So, that fixes that, said Bobby. His future hangs on this speech, and we've got it and he hasn't. We take it from there. And what exactly is the procedure? Oh, well, that's all arranged. He'll be ringing up any moment now, making inquiries. When he does, you step to the telephone and outline the position of affairs to him. Me? That's right. But why me? Jeeves deems it best. Well, really, Jeeves, why not Kipper? Mr. Herring and Mr. Upjohn are not on speaking terms, sir. So you can see what would happen if he heard Reggie's voice. He would hang up haughtily and all the weary work to do again, whereas he'll drink in your every word. But dash it. And anyway, Reggie's gone for a walk and isn't available. I do wish you wouldn't always be so difficult, Bertie. Your aunt tells me it was just the same when you were a child. She'd want you to eat your cereal, and you would stick your ears back and be stubborn and non-cooperative, like Jonah's ass in the Bible. I couldn't let this go uncorrected. It's pretty generally known that when at school I won a prize for scripture knowledge. Balaam's ass. Jonah was the chap who had the whale. Jeeves, sir. To settle a bet, wasn't it Balaam's ass that entered the nolle prosequi? Yes, sir. I told you so, I said to Bobby, and would have continued grinding her into the dust had not the telephone at this moment tinkled, diverting my mind from the point at issue. The sound sent a sudden chill through the Worcester limbs, for I knew what it portended. Bobby, too, was not unmoved. "Hello," she said. "This, if I mistake not, is our client now. In you go, Bertie, over the top, and the best of luck." I have mentioned before that Bertram Wooster, chilled steel when dealing with the sterner sex, is always wax in a woman's hands, and the present case was no exception to the R. Short of going over Niagara Falls in a barrel, I could think of nothing I wanted to do less than chat with Aubrey Upjohn at this juncture, especially along the lines indicated. But having been requested by one of the delicately nurtured to take on the grim task, I had no option. I mean, either a chap's purr or he isn't, as the Chevalier Bayard used to say. But as I approached the instrument and unhooked the thing you unhook, I was far from being at my most nonchalant, and when I heard Upjohn, "Are you there?"ing at the other end, my manly spirit definitely blew a fuse. For I could tell by his voice that he was in the testiest of moods. Not even when conferring with me at Malvern House, Bramley-on-Sea, on the occasion when I put sherbet in the ink, had I sensed in him a more marked stirred-upness. "Hello, hello, hello, are you there? Will you kindly answer me? This is Mr. Upjohn speaking." They always say that when the nervous system isn't all it should be. The thing to do is to take a couple of deep breaths, I took 6, which of course occupied a certain amount of time, and the delay noticeably increased his umbrage. Even at this distance one could spot what I believe is called the deleterious animal magnetism. "Is that Brinkley Court?" I could put him straight there, none other, I told him. "Who are you?" I had to think for a moment, then I remembered. This is Wooster, Mr. Upjohn." "Well, listen to me carefully, Wooster." Yes, Mr. Upjohn. How do you like the Bull and Bush? Everything pretty snug?" "What did you say?" "I was asking if you liked the Bull and Bush." "Never mind the Bull and Bush." No, Mr. Upjohn. This is of vital importance. I wish to speak to the man who packed my things." "Jeeves?" "What?" "Jeeves." "What do you mean by Jeeves?" "Jeeves. You keep saying Jeeves, and it makes no sense. Who packed my belongings?" "Jeeves." "Oh, Jeeves is the man's name." "Yes, Mr. Upjohn." Well, he carelessly omitted to pack the notes for my speech at Market Snodsbury Grammar School tomorrow." "Oh, no, really? I don't wonder you're sore." "Saw whom?" Saw with an R." "What?" "No, sorry. I mean with an O-R-E. "Wooster?" Yes, Mr. Upjohn." "Are you intoxicated?" "No, Mr. Upjohn." "Then you are drivelling. Stop drivelling, Wooster." Yes, Mr. Upjohn." "Send for this man Jeeves immediately, and ask him what he did with the notes for my speech." Yes, Mr. Upjohn." "At once. Don't stand there saying, 'Yes, Mr. Upjohn.'" "No, Mr. Upjohn." "It is imperative that I have them in my possession immediately." "Yes, Mr. Upjohn." Well, I suppose, looking at it squarely, I hadn't made much real progress, and a not too close observer might quite possibly have got the impression that I'd lost my nerve and was shirking the issue, but that didn't, in my opinion, justify Bobby at this point in snatching the receiver from my grasp and bellowing the word "worm" at me. "What did you call me?" said Upjohn. "I didn't call you anything," I said. "Somebody called me something." "I wish to speak to this man Jeeves." "Oh, you do you?" said Bobby. "Well, you're going to speak to me. This is Roberta Wickham, Upjohn. If I might have your kind attention for a moment." I must say that much as I disapproved in many ways of this carrot-top Jezebel, as she was sometimes called, there was no getting away from it that she had mastered the art of talking to retired preparatory schoolmasters. The golden words came pouring out like syrup. Of course, she wasn't handicapped as I'd been by having sojourned for some years beneath the roof of Malvern House, Bramley-on-Sea, and having, at a malleable age, associated with this old Frankenstein's monster when he was going good, but even so, her performance deserved credit. Beginning with a curt "Listen, Buster," she proceeded to sketch out with admirable clearness the salient points in the situation as she envisaged it. And judging from the loud buzzing noises that came over the wire, clearly audible to me, though now standing in the background, it was evident that the nub was not escaping him. They were the buzzing noises of a man slowly coming to the realization that a woman's hand had got him by the short hairs. Presently they died away, and Bobby spoke. "That's fine," she said. "I was sure you'd come round to our view. Then I will be with you shortly. Mind there's plenty of ink in your fountain pen." She hung up and legged it from the room, once more giving vent to those animal cries, and I turned to Jeeves as I had so often turned to him before when musing on the activities of the other sex. "Women, Jeeves." "Yes, sir." "Were you following all that?" "Yes, sir." "I gather that Upjohn, vowing, how does it go?" "Vowing he would ne'er consented, sir." "He is withdrawing the suit." "Yes, sir." "And Miss Wickham prudently specified that he do so in writing." "Thus avoiding all ranigazoo." "Yes, sir." "She thinks of everything." "Yes, sir." "I thought she was splendidly firm." "Yes, sir." "It's the red hair that does it, I imagine." "Yes, sir." If anyone had told me that I should live to hear Aubrey Upjohn addressed as Buster, I would have spoken further. But before I could get under way, the door opened, revealing Ma Cream, and he shimmered silently from the room. Unless expressly desired to remain, he always shimmers off when what is called the quality arrive. Chapter 20. This was the first time I had seen Ma Cream today, she having gone off around noon to lunch with some friends in Birmingham, and I'd willingly not have seen her now, for something in her manner seemed to suggest that she spelled trouble. She was looking more like Sherlock Holmes than ever, Slap a dressing gown on her and give her a violin, and she could have walked straight into Baker Street and no questions asked. Fixing me with a penetrating eye, she said, "Oh, there you are, Mr. Wooster. I was looking for you. You wished speech with me?" Yes. I wanted to say that now perhaps you'd believe me." I beg your pardon. About that butler." "What about him?" "I'll tell you what about him. I'd sit down if I were you. It's a long story." I sat down. Glad to, as a matter of fact, for the legs were feeling weak. "You remember I told you I mistrusted him from the first?" Yes, you did, didn't you?" "I said he had a criminal face." Well, he can't help his face. He can help being a crook and an impostor. Calls himself a butler, does he? The police could shake that story. He's no more a butler than I am." I did my best. "But, think of those references of his." "I am thinking of them." "He couldn't have stuck out as a major domo to a man like Sir Roderick Glossop if he'd been dishonest." "He didn't." But Bobby said, "I remember very clearly what Miss Wickham said. She told me he'd been with Sir Roderick Glossop for years." "Well, then, you think that puts him in the clear?" Certainly. "Well, I don't, and I will tell you why. Sir Roderick Glossop has a large clinic down in Somersetshire at a place called Chufnell Regis, and a friend of mine is there. I wrote to her asking her to see Lady Glossop and get all the information she could about a former butler of hers named Swordfish. When I got back from Birmingham just now, I found a letter from her. She says that Lady Glossop told her she had never employed a butler called Swordfish. Try that one on for size." I continued to do my best. The Woosters never give up. Well, you don't know Lady Glossop, do you?" "Well, of course I don't, or I'd have written to her direct." A charming woman, but with a memory like a sieve. The sort who's always losing one glove at the theatre. Naturally, she wouldn't remember a butler's name. She probably thought all along it was Fotheringay or Binks or something. Very common, that sort of mental lapse. I was up at Oxford with a man called Robinson, and I was trying to think of his name the other day, and the nearest I could get to it was Fosdyke. It only came back to me when I saw in the Times a few days ago that Herbert Robinson, 26, of Grove Road, Ponders End, had been had up at Bosher Street Police Court charged with having stolen a pair of green and yellow check trousers. Not the same chap, of course, but you get the idea. I've no doubt that one of these fine mornings Lady Glossop will suddenly smack herself on the forehead and cry, "Oh, Swordfish, of course! And all this time I've been thinking of the honest fellow as Catbird." She sniffed. And if I were to say that I liked the way she sniffed, I would be wilfully deceiving my public. It was the sort of sniff Sherlock Holmes would have sniffed when about to clap the darbies on the chap who had swiped the Maharaja's ruby. "Honest fellow, did you say? Then how do you account for this? I saw Willie just now, and he tells me that a valuable 18th century cow creamer which he bought from Mr. Travers is missing. And where is it, you ask? At this moment it is tucked away in Swordfish's bedroom in a drawer under his clean shirts." In stating that the Woosters never give up, I was in error. These words caught me amidships and took all the fighting spirit out of me, leaving me a spent force. Is it?" I said. "Not good, but the best I could do." Yes, sir, that's where it is. Directly Willie told me the thing had gone, I knew where it had gone, too. I went to this man Swordfish's room and searched it, and there it was. I've sent for the police." Again I had that feeling of having been spiritually knocked base over apex. I gaped at the woman. You've sent for the police?" "I have, and they're sending a sergeant. He ought to be here at any moment. And shall I tell you something? I'm going now to stand outside Swordfish's door to see that nobody tampers with the evidence. I'm not going to take any chances. I wouldn't want to say anything to suggest that I don't trust you implicitly, Mr. Wooster, but I don't like the way you've been sticking up for this fellow. You've been far too sympathetic with him for my taste." Well, it's just that I think he may have yielded to sudden temptation and all that." "Nonsense. He's probably been acting this way all his life. I'll bet he was swiping things as a small boy." Only biscuits. I beg your pardon? Or crackers, as you would call them, wouldn't you? Yes. He was telling me he occasionally pinched a cracker or two in his salad days. Well, there you are. You start with crackers and you end up with silver jugs. That's life, she said, and buzzed off to keep her vigil, leaving me kicking myself because I'd forgotten to say anything about the quality of mercy not being strained. It isn't, as I dare say you know, and a mention of this might just have done the trick. I was still brooding on this oversight and wondering what was to be done for the best when Bobby and Aunt Dahlia came in, looking like a young female and an elderly female who were sitting on top of the world. "Roberta tells me she has got Upjohn to withdraw the libel suit," said Aunt Dahlia. "I couldn't be more pleased, but I'm blowed if I can imagine how she did it." "Oh, I just appealed to his better feelings," said Bobby, giving me one of those significant glances. I got the message. The ancestor, she was warning me, must never learn that she had achieved her ends by jeopardizing the delivery of the Upjohn speech to the young scholars of Market Snodsbury Grammar School on the morrow. I told him that the quality of mercy... What's the matter, Bertie? Nothing, just starting. What do you want to start for? I believe Brinkley Court is open for starting in at about this hour, is it not? The quality of mercy, you were saying? Yes, it isn't strained. I believe not. And in any case, you didn't know. It's twice blessed and becomes the throned monarch better than its crown. I drove to the Bull and Bush and put this to Upjohn, and he saw my point. So now everything is fine. I uttered a hacking laugh. "No," I said in answer to a query from Aunt Dahlia, "I have not accidentally swallowed my tonsils. I was merely laughing hackingly." Ironical that the young blister should say that everything is fine, for at this very moment disaster stares us in the eyeballs. I have a story to relate that I think you will agree falls into the fretful porpentine class, I said, and without further pourparlers I unshipped my tale. I had anticipated that it would shake them to their foundation garments, and it did. Aunt Dahlia reeled like an ant struck behind the ear with a blunt instrument, and Bobby tottered like a red-haired girl who hadn't known it was loaded. "You see the setup," I continued, not wanting to rub it in, but feeling that they should be fully briefed. Glossop will return from his afternoon off to find the awful majesty of the law waiting for him, complete with handcuffs. We can hardly expect him to accept an exemplary sentence without a murmur, so his first move will be to establish his innocence by revealing all. "True," he will say, "I did pinch this Barry cow creamer, but merely because I thought Wilbert had pinched it, and it ought to be returned to store." And he will go on to explain his position in the house. All this, mind you, in front of Ma Cream. So what ensues? The sergeant removes the gyves from his wrists, and Ma Cream asks you if she may use your telephone for a moment, as she wishes to call her husband on long distance. Pop Cream listens attentively to the tale she tells, and when Uncle Tom looks in on him later, he finds him with folded arms and a forbidding scowl. "Travers," he says, "the deal is off." "Off?" quivers Uncle Tom. "Off," says Cream. "Oh, ruddy double F. I don't do business with guys whose wives bring in loony doctors to observe my son." A short while ago, Ma Cream was urging me to try something on for size. I suggest that you do the same for this. Aunt Dahlia had sunk into a chair and was starting to turn purple. Strong emotion always has this effect on her. "The only thing left, it seems to me," I said, "is to put our trust in a higher power." "You're right," said the relative, fanning her brow. "Go and fetch Jeeves, Roberta. And what you do, Bertie, is get out that car of yours and scour the countryside for Glossop. It may be possible to head him off. Come on, let's have some service. What are you waiting for?" I hadn't actually been waiting. I'd only been thinking that the enterprise had more than a touch of looking for a needle in a haystack about it. You can't find loony doctors on their afternoon off just by driving around Worcestershire in a car. You need bloodhounds and handkerchiefs for them to sniff at and all that professional stuff. Still, there it was. "Right ho," I said. "Anything to oblige." Chapter 21. And of course, as I had anticipated from the start, the thing was a washout. I stuck it out for about an hour, and then, apprised by a hollow feeling in the midriff that the dinner hour was approaching, laid a course for home. Arriving there, I found Bobby in the drawing-room. She had the air of a girl who was waiting for something, and when she told me that the cocktails would be coming along in a moment, I knew what it was. "Cocktails, eh? I could do with one, or possibly more," I said. "My fruitless quest has taken it out on me. I couldn't find Glossop anywhere. He must be somewhere, of course, but Worcestershire hid its secrets well." "Glossop," she said, seeming surprised. "Oh, he's been back for ages." She wasn't half as surprised as I was. The calm with which she spoke amazed me. "Good Lord, this is the end." "What is?" "This is. Has he been pinched?" "Of course not. He told them who he was, and he explained everything." "Oh, gosh. What's the matter?" "Oh, of course, I was forgetting. You don't know the latest developments. Jeeves solved everything." "He did?" "With a wave of the hand. It was so simple, really. One wondered why one hadn't thought of it oneself. On his advice, Glossop revealed his identity and said your aunt had got him down here to observe you." I reeled, and I might have fallen had I not clutched at a photograph on a nearby table of Uncle Tom in the uniform of the East Worcestershire Volunteers. "No," I said. And of course it carried immediate conviction with Mrs. Cream. "Your aunt explained that she'd been uneasy about you for a long time because you were always doing extraordinary things, like sliding down water pipes and keeping 23 cats in your bedroom and all that. And Mrs. Cream recalled the time when she'd found you hunting for mice under her son's dressing table. So she quite agreed that it was high time you were under the observation of an experienced eye like Glossop's. She was greatly relieved when Glossop assured her that he was confident of effecting a cure. She said we must all be very, very kind to you, so everything's nice and smooth. It's extraordinary how things turn out for the best, isn't it?" she said, laughing merrily. Whether I would or would not at this juncture have taken her in an iron grasp and shaken her till she frothed is a point on which I can make no definite announcement. The chivalrous spirit of the Worcesters would probably have restrained me, much as I resented that merry laughter, but as it happened the matter was not put to the test, for at this moment Jeeves entered, bearing a tray on which were glasses and a substantial shaker filled to the brim with the juice of the juniper berry. Bobby drained her beaker with all possible speed and left us, saying that if she didn't get dressed she'd be late for dinner. And Jeeves and I were alone, like a couple of bimbos in one of those movies where two strong men stand face to face and might is the only law. "Well, Jeeves," I said. "Sir?" "Miss Wickham has been telling me all." "Ah, yes, sir." The words, "ah, yes, sir," fall far short of an adequate comment on the situation. A nice, what is it, begins with an I, something. Imbroglio, sir. Ah, yes, that's it. A nice imbroglio you landed me in. Thanks to you. Yes, sir. Don't say yes, sir. Thanks to you, I have been widely publicized as off my rocker. Not widely, sir. Merely to your immediate circle, now resident of Brinkley Court. You have held me up at the bar of world opinion as a man who has not got all his marbles. Well, it was not easy to think of an alternative scheme, sir. And let me tell you, I said, and I meant this to sting, it's amazing that you got away with it. Sir, there is a flaw in your story that sticks up like a sore thumb. Sir? It is no good standing there saying, "Sir, Jeeves." It's obvious. The cow creamer was in Glossop's bedroom. Ha-ha! How did he account for that? On my suggestion, sir, he had explained that he had removed it from your room, where he had ascertained that you had hidden it after purloining it from Mr. Cream. I started. You mean Yes, thundered would be the word. You mean that I am now labelled not only as a loony in a general sort of way, but also as a klept whatever it is? Merely to your immediate circle, now resident of Brinkley Court, sir. You keep saying that, and you must know it's the purest applesauce. You don't really think the Creams will maintain a taxal reserve. They'll dine out on it for years. Returning to America, they'll spread the story from the rock-bound coasts of Maine to the Everglades of Florida, with the result that when I go over there again, keen looks will be shot at me at every house I go into, and spoons counted before I leave. And do you realize that in a few shakes I've got to show up at dinner and have Mrs. Cream being very, very kind to me? It hurts the pride of the Woosters, Jeeves. My advice, sir, would be to fortify yourself for the ordeal. How? There are always cocktails, sir. Should I pour you another? You should. And we must always remember what the poet Longfellow said, sir. What was that? Something attempted, something done, has earned a night's repose. You have the satisfaction of having sacrificed yourself in the interests of Mr. Travers. He'd found the talking point. He had reminded me of those postal orders, sometimes for as much as 10 bob, which Uncle Tom had sent me in the Malvern House days. I softened. Whether or not a tear rose to my eye, I cannot say, but it may be taken as official that I softened. "How right you are, Jeeves," I said.
That was Ian Carmichael reading Jeeves in the Offing by P.G. Wodehouse.